salvation is to be saved from all the consequences of sin, one of which being death, of course, according to the words of Jesus Christ in Luke chapter 20, verses 35 to 37, and of course Hosea the prophet in Hosea chapter 13, verse 14. Getting into this now, the first question that comes to my mind is, can we alone save ourselves by our good deeds? But from what I've seen, I'd say no, because of the sin that happened in the Garden of Eden in Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 to 6 and verse 19. Because of that deed, we as mankind share of that sin and its punishment, as we all came from those sinful individuals. So everything that we do, even if it's good, still comes from a sinful body, a sinful self, as Job told us in Job chapter 14, verse 4. And Paul even added to that in Romans 5:12. Now, it would have really sucked to have faced this eternal cycle of death forever, but God, who was ever gracious, decided to provide a ransom so that we can be freed from that terrible fate, as Paul the Apostle told us in Romans chapter 5, verses 8 to 11. And just for clarity, let's look at verse 10 specifically. For if, when we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more, being reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. An example of when this ransom thing, also known as atonement, was done before in the Bible was on the Day of Atonement, and on that day, Aaron, the high priest, would make an atonement on behalf of the people, and the people would have to follow specific rules that day, or else they wouldn't be cleansed, and the atonement, ransom, would not apply to them, according to Leviticus chapter 16, verses 29 to 31. But what does this have to do with what Paul said? Wait a minute. Right. If the atonement didn't apply to the Israelites because they weren't holy, Jesus' atonement also wouldn't apply to us if we're not holy and serving God throughout our lives. But there seems to be an issue here. Isn't it that when we're saved, when we believe in Christ, and not some point afterwards? So where do we fit all this gotta be righteous for our lives so that we can atone for? Where did this all come from? Well, the reason why there's a discrepancy here is that we don't actually start with salvation right when we come to Christ. Paul actually said this himself in Hebrews 3:14. For we are made partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast onto the end. He clearly indicated here that we can only be saved after we've proven we're righteous, and that can only be told at the end of our lives. Why? Because if we ever go astray and don't come back to God, all the righteousness that we've displayed before that point doesn't actually count. Ezekiel told this specifically in Ezekiel chapter 33, verse 13. When I say to the righteous that he shall surely live, if he trust to his own righteousness and commit iniquity, all of his righteousnesses shall not be remembered, but for his iniquity that he hath committed, he shall die for it. So it seems as though we haven't been saved yet, and we have a lot of work to do from now onwards, since we're still alive and we can still fall astray. So since we haven't gotten our salvation yet, how do we get it? Well, the verse this specific video came from says that we should work out our salvation, Philippians 2:12. And the best way of doing that, just like the Israelites on the Day of Atonement, is to be righteous. And the goal is to keep that righteousness going till the day we die. Whenever we start to learn about God, that's when we start working out our salvation. If we're a young adult, we have to make sure that we don't commit fornication, otherwise known as premarital sex, or adultery, according to Galatians chapter 5, verses 19 to 21. When we're married, by God's grace, if we're women, we'll let our husbands lead, and not try to lead as well, according to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22. Once we have kids, we'll raise them in the fear of God, as we were told to do in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 to 7. We also won't leave them for others, and focus all of our attention on building our careers as well. When our children are grown up and we are old, us being righteous will be seen as an example to others, as Christ said we should be in Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, and will mentor others in the fear of God. And throughout our lives, there will also be challenges, as Paul warned us about in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 12. So we have to make sure that we have this tight relationship with God throughout our entire lives, to make sure that we don't go astray because of those as well. So, as we can see, serving God is a whole life affair, from the beginning of our lives to the very end. and we have to make sure that we are doing all that rightly before we can say that we're saved. But looking at all this, that sounds really daunting, and it is. That level of commitment for that long of a time is really hard to achieve. But God is patient, God is forgiving, and God will help us each and every step of the way, and will even make sure that nothing comes our way that we can't handle, according to Paul's words in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. So we'll at least have that to anchor us in these troubling times. And that's what I have today for the topic of salvation. If you like this kind of content and would like to see more, then I would really appreciate it if you click the like button and also the subscribe button and maybe also the notification bell so you'll be notified of when I post again. Have a great day, and I'd love to see all of you soon.